if you interview someone regarding that particular incident or that particular event, it automatically becomes hard news. Interviewing people is the best way to get to know different points of view of that same story. What do you mean by this? Description and explanation. It's more of a qualitative approach. Interviews and hard news and soft news and media conferences, these are all means of gathering news physically. Hello everyone and welcome to a new session of your journalistic journey with me, Zubin Paul, your journalism faculty at Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence. Today we are going to delve into the session 2 of our third unit, and that deals with techniques of news gathering. We have studied what are the news sources and what news is, etc., etc. But news gathering, this is another ball game also. Some of the concepts will again be very familiar to you, but let us just go into the topic and get to know in detail what our news gathering techniques are. So just an overview of what we'll be doing. We'll be studying about interviews, media conferences, press releases, and field work and observation. Of course, we'll have dealt with a few of these in our previous sessions as well, but today we will deal with them in a little different perspective. First one, let us see what news gathering actually is. As the name suggests, it's nothing very, sciencey, nothing mathematical. It's very simple. Gathering of stories which are considered to be newsworthy with the intention of publishing them as news. Very simple. If you find something which is newsworthy and you gather that particular story with the intention of publishing it as news, that is called news gathering. Very simple. Must gather both hard news and soft news. Here come two new terms for us, that is hard news and soft news. Let's see what they are. As the name suggests, hard news is typically used to refer to topics that are usually timely, important, and consequential. Timely, important, and consequential, such as politics, international affairs, and business news. These three things are small examples of what actually matter for the functioning of the society. So this kind of direct news is what is called hard news. Sir, I'm still not able to gauge what is hard news. If you get to know what is soft news, you will definitely get to know what is hard news. Let's see what soft news is. Conversely, soft news topics include entertainment, celebrities, and lifestyle news. Very simple. I'm sure you'll have got to know what this is now. Anything other than these three is called hard news. I hope you guys have understood this, and it's a very, very important thing to understand what is hard news and soft news, because it all comes down to prioritizing again. In your journalistic journey ahead, in your organizations, you will come across times when you will have to choose between 2-3 different articles or more in order to which we have to publish, etc., etc. In that case, you will have to differentiate first at the most surface level. Is it a soft news or is it a hard news? So in that case, you will have to prioritize whichever one is most important at that particular moment of time. And also there are a few organizations that focus purely on soft news. So being in a soft news organization, you cannot try to focus on hard news, because that will be totally against the image and the focus of your own organization. So in that terms, you need to focus on either soft news or hard news whenever required. Now the first method of gathering news, probably the most common way of gathering news is interview. About 90% of everything in the news story is based on some form of interviewing, either in person, by telephone, or occasionally by correspondence. What is an interview? Basically, it is when you speak to someone about something. So all the information that you get is definitely by communicating or speaking with someone. That is nothing but an interview itself. If you ask someone a question and the person answers you in a journalistic scenario, that can account for a small interview as well. So in this case, everything that we get is by communicating with someone else, either in person or by telephone or by correspondence. Correspondence in the sense, if your reporter or if your friend reporter or if your colleague is in some other place and then you need to gather news from that place, you will take his or her correspondence from there. That person from there will report and give you updates as and when they happen. That is called correspondence. Of course, in TV you will have noticed that we have our correspondent in this kind of place, in that place we have our correspondent on the scene of the crime, etc., etc. That kind of words you may have heard, but this is basically what happens there. The news interview is based on hard news. A news interview is based on hard news. Why is it based on hard news? Some event or development of the current and immediate interest. That is why. Because hard news, as I said, is something that is very important for the people, something very important for the society. That is why any small interview that is done, even the smallest interview that is done, wherein a news story is involved, it becomes hard news. Keep this in mind always. Whenever you go to the scene of the crime or something, or at the event, if you interview someone regarding that particular incident or that particular event, it automatically becomes hard news. It accounts for hard news rather. If you publish it, it definitely becomes hard news. So this is what accounts to be the essence of an interview. A distinction must be made between news stories that are merely based on interviews and actual interview stories. What does this mean? A distinction must be made between news stories that are merely based on interviews. That is, if you have taken someone's interview and made a news story out of it. For example, something has happened, okay, some accident has happened in a particular place, on a particular road. There has been some witness to that accident. Now, when you look for any witnesses there, that person comes and you interview that person. What interview facts he has told, he or she has told, based on that, if we create an article, it can be a news article. But another way of putting an interview forward is to focus on the interview itself. It may be the interview of a particular politician, of a particular celebrity. So there the person becomes important. But on the flip side, in this case, what becomes important? The incident becomes important. And the interview is just a part of that incident. The interview is a medium of getting information about that incident. So there has to be a distinction between the stories that are based on interviews and an actual interview stories. Why is this important? Because when you are communicating with your higher-ups in your organization, if you have gone to an accident and said and gathered information from a particular eyewitness, you have interviewed the eyewitness or etc., etc., and then you can't come back and say, I have an interview story. You cannot say that. You have to say that you have a news story of an accident, and then you have to quote your source. The source is the interview. I hope this is clear. If you've not understood, just rewind it and see. Coming to the next part, the actual interview. When can you say you have an interview story? It is when you actually interview a major personality and your whole report will be based on that particular personality's interview. So that is the difference that you need to have, and when you are communicating to someone, that is why this point is very important. Next point. The journalist is concerned with a news event that requires interviewing people to learn the fact. A journalist is always concerned with a news event that requires interviewing people to learn the facts, in the sense the interviewing people is the best way to get to know different points of view of that same story. You may or may not have been present on the spot for that event or for that incident to have happened. But speaking to more and more number of people gives you more and more better perspectives, different angles maybe, to analyze what may have actually happened and what is the cause of something happening. So that is why journalists always prefer to speak to people. If you may also have encountered sometimes, if you go to a particular, a crime spot or something, an event or something where people are holding these mics and interviewing people, that is basically because they want to know different opinions of people. They themselves can't give opinions. Majorly, journalists, all they can do is gather opinions and present them as they are. So that is why this becomes very important. The interview story, on the other hand, is essentially a feature built around the views, personality or exploits of an individual or group of individuals. This is what I have just explained till now. You can just read this once more. The interview story, on the other hand, is essentially a feature built around the views, personality or exploits of an individual or group of individuals. It may be a news article, but typically when you interview a politician or a celebrity or anyone for that matter, it comes under the feature category. When you have a write-up regarding that, it comes under the feature category, because you will pick out what is the essence of that interview and you will shape that report to become interesting and give it a very good structure. That comes under feature format. That is why an interview story is different from a news story based on an interview. So next, media conferences. In my previous session, I have spoken about press conferences in one of the previous sessions. Now this is just a brush up of what happens. The person interviewed at a media conference may be the president of the nation, may be a manager of a big league team, maybe Shah Rukh Khan to own Kolkata Knight Riders, maybe a movie star, or any other person promoting what is believed to be a news story of interest to the public. That is basically what happens. A person is being interviewed by all of these journalists at a particular meeting, at a particular conference, and it may be anyone, but whatever he or she has to say, they may feel it is important for the public to know. That is why they have that kind of a media conference. Preliminary groundwork pays off. A knowledge of the interviewee's background is indispensable. It is always important, especially when you are going for certain press conferences or media conferences wherein there is some controversy or an issue which is surrounding that particular company or that particular person. It is best to do very good homework and groundwork and research and go, so that you can utilize that opportunity to actually pose the questions that will matter to you, or that may give you a very good news story, or even more importantly, that may reveal something not known to the public. You need to find different perspectives. That is why you need to come up with good research. That is only when you will get good different kinds of angles to approach it and utilize that opportunity to the best potential, so that you can ask the person who is holding the press conference about certain issues which may not have been addressed or which require to be addressed. During the conference, an alertness to story possibilities often leads to unexpected results. This again, as I have said many times previously, comes with practice. You need to have a keen sense of news, a nose for news. You need to have that nose for news. You need to have that alertness regarding what can be news, what statement can lead to good news articles. So that kind of a perspective you need to develop. And of course, if you read more and more news and if you watch more and more news, you automatically will get to know the perspective in which you need to think. It comes by practice, and I highly recommend that you keep at it all the time. The third one is a press release. Most press releases are available for immediate release. What does this mean? The company or the organization sends out a press release which needs to be immediately put out and immediately conveyed and immediately communicated to the public. They don't put out very redundant news in a press release. If a press release has been received by the news organization from some particular company, it means that that story or that release is an immediate requirement. This means anyone can share the information as soon as you want to make it public through a press release, as we have again studied in our previous sessions, one of them. If you are sharing something, that needs to remain secret until the right time. You might specify a date coverage can begin. For example, if you want to intimate the media organizations about a particular event happening or about a particular development in your company, you can put up a press release and send it directly to these news organizations, but you can also specify that you would request the organization to provide coverage for that particular event or that development from a certain date onwards, because that is when it is going to start. So this can just give a small head start to the media organizations, and that can help in effective coverage of that event or development. That is all that is usually required of a press release. And mostly if you send out a press release just immediately, you never know, the organization may or may not have reporters free enough to come and give you proper coverage for that particular event. But still, if you intimate them a little in prior and tell them to keep it a secret, or not even to keep it a secret, just tell them to provide you coverage from this date onwards, I think that can be done, because then they can manage their time and schedules likewise, and they can assign reporters to cover that particular news item. The fourth one, which is the most common one, especially for in-house reporters, is field work and observation. Field work and observation is useful for collecting data and generating hypotheses and theories. What does this mean? It basically means that when you go and search for a particular news story and that news story leads to another story, this kind of a chain reaction may start. You never know. You can go and start searching for these news items, and based on those news stories, if there are something that is linking one story to another, you can generate hypotheses and theories. This can only happen when you do good field work and observation. What do you mean by field work? Field work basically means that you go outside and try to gather as much information physically from someone. Of course, there is the privilege of having phone at your hand, of having internet at your hand, but there is nothing that can replace a direct physical contact and directly getting to know that this is the truth, this is what is happening at this spot, this is what means this. All of the physical elements that are involved in doing this kind of observation and field work cannot be replaced by any kind of phone calls or internet, even in the future. It is concerned more with description and explanation than with the measurement and quantification. What do you mean by this? Description and explanation? It's more of a qualitative approach. It does not usually deal with numbers. It is more of a cause and effect study. It is more of an explanatory study of why something may have happened or what may happen. It is all about this kind of an approach, this kind of a perspective to things. It usually doesn't deal with statistics, but statistics is a big part of getting information, and through statistical data you can infer a lot of possibilities and probabilities for the future. It may be in any kind of field. Field observation often helps the researcher define basic background information necessary to frame a hypothesis and other related derivations. Yeah, of course, if you do proper research, only then will you be able to form a kind of basis for what you are saying. There will be a sort of validity for whatever you have found, and through your findings you can make certain derivations. And only when you give certain authentic assurance about your sources or about your observations, only then your derivations can be proven to be useful. For example, a journalist doing research on how creative decisions in advertising are made should or could observe several decision-making sessions to see what happens. Again, a journalist doing research on how creative decisions are made in advertising. Advertising is all about, creativity, and creative decisions means in terms of how do we project this product, what is the color scheme, etc., etc., what's our tagline, etc. There are so many creative decisions involved in advertising. Now, if a journalist is trying to, make up a report of how these kind of decisions are taken and what is the perspective in which these advertisers think, he or she can just observe a few decision-making sessions. Quiet observer. This is also accounting for field work itself, because you are going physically and you are witnessing that kind of a decision-making session. And it cannot happen with just one session. You need to attend several sessions. You need to be a silent observer of several sessions. Only that is when you can get good background information. Then only your observations can lead to good derivations, and then you can make proper hypothesis. Now, why is this research important for a journalist, sir? Research is definitely important for a journalist because the fact of the matter is that whenever people get to know that you are a journalist, they think that you are a walking encyclopedia. They expect you to know every detail that is happening around. But not just for that sake. Why research is important is because it gives you proper hands-on, in-depth hold on any kind of news story. As I mentioned in the previous slide, interviews and hard news and soft news and media conferences, these are all means of gathering news physically. You go there and then you apply your mind, you get to know what is important and you gather it yourself. Despite the availability of sources, this is how you have to think. And coming back to our field work and observation, this is what encompasses the entire process of being a journalist, of being a reporter at its basics. As we are studying reporting this semester, you have to focus on this kind of a perspective that when you are a reporter, you can't just sit and wait for people to upload information on Instagram or Facebook or any other kind of news portal, small news portals. You have to be ready to do physical field work and observation. And that is what will give you the maximum fruit of your work. Trust me on this fact. In the physical world, field observation entails watching people behave in their normal surroundings. As I said, if you need to have any kind of observation, it entails people watching people in their normal surroundings. That is when you actually get to know what is the true essence of their behavior. In the online world, field observation usually means observing text and images on a computer screen. Why have I put this is because there are certain fields wherein an observation is required for the online medium as well, about behavior of people on the online medium, that is the internet, on social media. News agencies and news organizations are strongly researching based on how people are consuming their news online, how are people behaving online. There was a time when we had only text in social media. Then came the images. Then now every second video that you see, or rather 90% of the posts that you see on any social media is video content. It may be short video, it may be long video, but it is video content. So that is how times have changed, and news organizations need to be informed of this at the earliest. If they are very, very observant and can analyze all of this at an earlier stage, they can just develop their own practices to be in sync with the trend and behavior of their target audience. Now, you as a journalist, if you imagine, just imagine, if you have this kind of an understanding, it will put you at an edge over everyone else around you. If you understand all of this, if you get this kind of a skill to do proper field observation and research, it will be nothing like it. So then, just a small recap. We have studied about interview, we have studied about the media conference, we have studied about press release and field work and observation. So these are the 4 kinds and 4 methods of gathering news, the 4 techniques of news gathering. Of course, there are different techniques as well, but these are the ones that encompass majority of the news that you see around you. So that does it for today's session. I hope you have had a good time. I'll meet you in the next session with another very interesting topic. Until then, take care, stay safe, and thank you. See you.